All right. Anything else?
Not for me. I just ordered some lo mein. Uber Eats says it'll be here between 1 and 1:15.
Let's hope for 1 o'clock. I don't know. Hope the Asian food isn't coming. Isn't on one of those boats in Long Beach Harbor.
I think for the casual racism today. Our guy's in a Toyota Camry.
When I get messages from some of my friends, my few remaining friends, they come as texts, and so I don't know how to save text messages.
Judge, you don't have to save them. They're in your phone.
So then I do a screenshot of it, and I email it to myself to save it.
What the hell is this guy talking about?
But I found it to my distress. But some of them are pretty long, and they show up in my email.
Am I the only one saying this? Is this like a field of dreams?
Some of them are even smaller than this.
Are we still in a murder trial?
Then I go to open them up.
Hey man, turn on the trial.
And it's just a blur.
Yeah, man, watch this dude. He's crazy, man.
To a site, I could explode it again or decrease its size.
I'm just gonna get started on the lo mein. I think you might be here for me.
I don't know, but.
All right, guys, welcome. We always start with a little video, funny video. I hadn't seen that one yet. It was, I thought, funny. So we've got an exciting event tonight. There'll be a link in the chat for tonight's cocktail recipe. It's the Poet's Martini, and we'll take a very short break around 6:45 for the drink lesson, which we always do for those of you who are new tonight. And I want to jump right into it. We've got Brad Edwards, Brittany Henderson, and their partner, Stan Pottinger. I'm going to start with Brad and Brittany, who wrote this book that we've all read. Roland, let's bring them on while I introduce them. Brad is a founding partner of Edwards Pottinger. He specializes in representing children, survivors of sexual abuse, and victims of violent crimes. He and Brittany won the largest jury verdict that I know of in the entire United States on behalf of a single sexual abuse survivor. I should say right at the start, Brad was in New York today with, the Maxwell trial is going on. He was with some of the Epstein victims, and he's under a strict order from the judge in the trial to ensure that the defendants get a fair trial. So I just want to mention two things. We're going to be very careful about that. First of all, and secondly, I want to remind everyone that everything on this trial school forum is confidential. We also have Brittany Henderson, partner at Edwards Pottinger, and she also represents crime victims and survivors of sexual abuse. She has nearly $100 million in jury verdicts and settlements. She co-founded 2 charities for sexual abuse survivors, and together they've done some amazing lawyering in the Epstein cases, and they've written really a fascinating book. So welcome, guys.
Thanks, John. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I know you got so much going on right now. In some ways, this is a great time for us, but I know it's a hard time for you guys. So thank you for being here.
No problem. It's great. And I thought that video to start it was pretty funny too.
Yeah. Sometimes, because I let Roland pick the videos, sometimes I get nervous about what's going to come on, but that one I think we were okay with. So look, we have some other panelists. We've got Stan, who we're going to bring on soon, but I'll introduce them when we bring them on so we don't start with too many introductions. I want to start, look, there's so much about the case that, and people have emailed me or called me, they've got questions for you. There's really been a lot of interest in it. And there's so much about the case I want to talk about. Brad, I've known you, but until I read the book, I didn't really know who you were. There were so many moments in that book where you made decisions that I thought, wow, and I mean that truly from my heart. I think for all three of you guys, it was heroic lawyering, and it's inspiring. But before we get into that, let's talk about writing the book, because in my opinion, it's really hard for lawyers to write good books. Something about law school or something, I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of books written by lawyers that are not as fascinating and just compelling as yours. So, let me start with that. And this is all my questions are for both of you. And when we bring the other panelists, all the panelists, but for both of you, how'd you guys do it? How'd you write such a great book?
So I have my version, and I'm sure that Brittany will correct it. But it really came about because every time we would get close to trying a case, somehow the case would settle. And I would say, I can't believe we don't get to give a closing argument in this case. I mean, I feel like I've prepared a closing argument for 10 years and I don't get to give it. And then we started just hearing rumors that all these people were going to write an Epstein book. And I go, these people don't know anything about this. And I would just complain, but I was only really complaining to Brittany. And so she says, well, why don't you just write it then? Like, I've heard enough of you just talking about it. Let's just write the book. I said, we don't really have time to write the book. And she said, sure. I mean, all you like to do is just walk around and talk. So so I promise you that 6 o'clock happens. Instead of you walking around the office and telling stories, why don't you start at the beginning and just tell them to me? I'll type them out and then we'll start kind of putting it together. So I'll tell you, the first couple of nights was literally 6 at night until 4 in the morning for almost a month straight. Almost every day from 6 at night till 4 in the morning, we wrote. And really the process was me more like stream of consciousness ranting in terms of how I remembered the story. And then after I was done talking for 8 hours, Brittany would then edit all night so that she would actually take my memory and make it factual. I mean, she would come back the next day and say, yeah, you thought you said this in this deposition, but it didn't really go down like that. And I would argue with her. She'd have to pull up the transcript. And, I can tell you that for as good of friends as we are, there were times during that writing process where I thought we would never talk to each other again. I mean, it's 3 in the morning. We're screaming at each other at the top of our lungs about what should go in this book and what shouldn't go in the book. But I'm really proud of it. I think that we really captured kind of the ebb and flow of the case pretty well.
And I think if you asked Brad, he would think that he just talked and then a book appeared. But it took a lot for us to take what we started with 1,200 pages of written material and turn it into what you guys have read. So I think a lot of the fighting came from that. And Brad would read the transcripts and see that he was wrong and still be like, no, it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way. I remember it differently. It has to go in the book how I remember it. I'm like, all right. So we did have a lot of fun, but it was a lot more difficult of a process than I think he remembers.
He wrote in the acknowledgments that, and I assume the acknowledgments were written entirely by Brad, but he wrote that you, Brittany, edited, rearranged, and generally wrote the book, which, oh man, I'm in a hotel. Sorry, let me just find out why the lights went out.
It was very dramatic.
Thought it was timed on purpose.
I don't know if it was a power save or something. I'm in Chicago, everybody, guys, instead of my office. So sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, I'm going to ask Brad, does he realize how lucky he was to be working with you and how hard that process was? But first, let me just ask you, just in terms of like what goes first, the way where you started the book, instead of having it at the end, having that at the beginning, the pacing, how much time you put on each chapter. I mean, it's really wonderful. So congratulations. But I mean, how did you know how to do that?
I think honestly, so everything that we do in our office from Brad's perspective is in chronological order. If you're working on a case, you're working on a book, you're working on a conversation with your kids, you start at the beginning and you go from beginning to end. And I think it made the process really easy for us because he literally just started telling the story from the very first time he ever heard Jeffrey Epstein's name. And we went through the whole thing. And I think there was a lot of like personal things that were going on and different facts that it was really difficult for him to cut out because it was his life. So I think having me there doing it with him made it a lot easier to get to a final product, because I would say like, is it really that important that you went to this restaurant and had dinner on July 7th of 2009? And he's like, yeah, I mean, that was where everything was happening in my mind. I decided what was going on. I'm like, yeah, but can we just tell them it happened without explaining to them that you ate chicken for dinner? And so I think having someone who wasn't as intimately involved in the story, especially at the beginning, made it a lot easier for us to get to the end.
But we did make a decision at the end to start the book where we had just finished, basically with him being arrested and how when we learned of him being arrested and everything else, because we thought it made most sense for people who were just now catching up to the story because he had just died. The hearing had just been held where all these victims testified. And then we kind of went back to how the book was originally written, which was totally chronological. And like she said, after 1 month, we had 1,200 pages. The next 6 months was reducing that to something that somebody would actually read.
Well, and Stan Pottinger is on. I know you're going to bring him on a little bit later, but he's our law partner and he's also an author of a number of books. So we ran a lot of this by Stan. And so we just kind of had a boring story and went from start to finish. And Stan's like, guys, you're not authors, you're lawyers. You've got to start with something dramatic, theatrical, like in the courtroom. And so Brad was like, yes, I've got this. We're going to start with it thundering and lightning and all of these things going on. So I think trying to transition to authors from trial lawyers made it a little bit more exciting too.
That it was almost like lightning in a bottle to have the two of you and then to have Stan. So I know in preparing for this, I saw that he's written 4 books. I haven't read them yet, but I will, and I'll report back to everybody on them. I can't yet say that they're good, but just based on his advice that he gave you on this, I expect they are. So that was lucky that you had him too. We'll have him on in just a minute. Let me ask you one more question before we start bringing more people on. You guys, this is a reflection of your lawyering and your writing, but you did an amazing job describing the disorientation of the victims, the grooming, the things that really might seem strange to jurors initially, or people who don't understand this kind of situation, like that they took money, going back again. So my question is, how did you, first of all, as a lawyer, what did you do to understand your clients so well so that one day you could try the case, or in this situation, write about it?
Spent a lot of time with them. I mean, we got to know so many of them so well. I mean, I would say that, Courtney Wild is one of my best friends in the world now, and that's a pretty rare thing for any lawyer to say about a client, but that's just how close that we became over 13 years. And so you get to know them. And I think that one of the first things that I wanted to do when I got the case was reframe the way that the victims were being treated. As you may recall, they were all being, kind of labeled as prostitutes. And so, I mean, that was very important that, to one, understand that the public will actually latch on to something like that and buy into it and repeat that mantra that these are just prostitutes. I mean, we even had, as you saw, some judges who were pretty respected who thought, hey, look, these aren't normal high school girls and they don't deserve this level of protection. So I thought one of the main things that we wanted to do with the case from the very beginning is describe them as the children that they were, who came from the backgrounds that they did, and that these were very clearly not prostitutes, and it would be wrong to cast them as that. And so I think that, we took how we litigated the case, how we relabeled them during the case as children, and took away that false label of being a prostitute or any of these other derogatory terms, drug addicts and things like that, because a lot of those other terms like drug addicted, homelessness was a consequence of the abuse that they suffered. And that's something that we've known from other cases and seen it from other cases. So, I mean, at this point, it's easier for us, but I thought that what we wanted to do was convey it in terms that people could read and understand it. It wasn't just legalese or lawyer expert type talk.
And with respect to the book, it was really important to us that we captured our clients' perspectives accurately, and it wasn't just ours. So each character, each woman that you see in the book, we talked to before the book was published, while we were writing, gave them a chance to make sure that their voice was adequately covered by what we wrote too. So that was the one thing I think that held Brad back from wanting to write the book, was like, I can't do this and then not do justice for our clients. What if they don't like it? What if they don't like what we write? So I think our main focus was making sure that we had a final product that really captured what they went through and how they felt.
Well, you did a remarkable job of it. And I think it's a real value in the book, not just a small group of people in a courtroom or on a jury, but to bring it to a much larger audience to understand the situation that those girls were in. I actually want to follow up on that, what the judge said, Brad, that you just brought up, but let me bring on Stan, and I'll also bring on Rich Newsom now. So Roland, if you could bring them on. Stan is also a founding partner at Edwards Pottinger. He's the former director of the Office of Civil Rights. He was instrumental in the passage of Title IX and he was in charge of school desegregation and affirmative action in the employment of women and minorities by colleges, universities, hospitals. And as I think Brittany just brought up, he's written 4 novels. I won't promise to read all 4 of them, but within the next month or 2, I'll read at least one, and I'll let you guys know about them. And then we've got Rich and Stan. You're on video, so I hope you're not doing something that you don't want us to see. But when you're ready, turn the video on. Hey, Stan.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you and see you now. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. This is fun.
And then we've got Rich Newsom, who's everyone in trial school knows Rich. To keep this short, National Law Journal recognized him as having won 2 of the nation's 100 largest verdicts in a single year. He's an amazing trial lawyer, an amazing human being. He's in Chicago here with me right now in the same hotel. So hopefully if the lights go out, they go out for him too. And it's not just somebody who's mad at me. So for all of you guys, Stan, Rich, feel free to jump in and ask questions of Brad and Brittany or Rich of Stan at any time. And especially if you disagree, don't keep it to yourself, bring it up. I'd love to get differences of opinion. But let me follow up now and with something Brad said, which I was talking about the judge on the motion for punitive damages early on. In Florida, you have to amend the complaint. You have to get judicial permission to amend the complaint before you can plead claim for punitive damages. And I'll say in general that, you know, I've really felt inspired by you 3 and the lawyering, but I also felt bad after reading this book. And, you know, part of it is what the victims went through, that you did such a good job, but it's more than that. And if you look at that moment when the judge was commenting on the record, so look, you're moving to amend the complaint to add punitive damages for an intentional tort, child molestation, sexual assault. Obviously, there is no doubt that justifies punitive damages in Florida, and I think every single state in the United States. There's no doubt about it. All you have to do is have a jury question about whether it was actually committed. But what the judge said, and I'll quote him on this, is this is a close call because these are not, quote, traditional or normal high school aged women. And you know what, I guess what I thought of when I was reading that, and even later in the book, it wasn't just Epstein who viewed them as less. And it wasn't just his defense lawyers who did, but they did. And some people in the press, and even some of the prosecutors, it was like a cultural thing. And I mean, I guess my question for all of you is, doesn't that say something really kind of sickening about who we are as a country and a culture?
Yeah, I do think that we've come a long way, though. I mean, I think we did see a turning of the tides with the Me Too movement, and I know that, and I think that our Crime Victims' Rights Act case has a lot to do with the way that victims are treated differently now than they were 10 years ago. So, so we have seen noticeable differences around the country, but it's still very concerning. I mean, the one thing that happened was Epstein hired a very high-powered team that got out in front of the story before I ever even knew about the story, and was already casting them as from the wrong side of the tracks, bad kids who committed theft. And I think Dershowitz went on and said, look, this girl even brags about smoking marijuana on her MySpace page, so you can't really care too much about her. And by the time that there was an arrangement, you know, the secret arrangement as to what Jeffrey Epstein would agree to plea to, he ultimately agrees to plead to solicitation of prostitution, which then provided a formal label for all of these high school kids as prostitutes. And it was inescapable then, because this wasn't just now someone's opinion or you know, Epstein's lawyers spouting off. Now this is the charge that he's pleading guilty to as it relates to these kids. And so, you know, the part that I was caught off guard that day of the punitive damage hearing, because I've argued, I don't know, 50 punitive damage hearings, and there's usually not much of an argument. Especially with something like this, it's not even a close call. Sometimes you don't even have a hearing. And to go in there and 2 hours into this hearing, we're still listening to the judge pontificate about whether or not this warrants punitive damages. And some of the things that, the direct comments he made were really, really troubling. And it said, I think what you were just saying, which is, it says something about us as people that we can treat people differently just because of where they're from or the economic disparity or whatever other criteria he was using.
Anyone else want to talk about that?
Well, I will. I'd like to second one thing that Brad is saying, and I know Brittany feels the same, and that is this sea change, this big shift that has occurred in our culture. If law is a reflection ultimately over a period of time of cultural values and political values, then that's what Brad just described about what the judge was doing and how to label people. I think those days are behind us. At least I hope so.
Well, I think it's one thing to look at this from all of our perspective, but it's a different thing to be Courtney Wild or be one of the victims who was either in the courtroom or had to be reported back to by Brad and the other lawyers and say, this is what happened and this is what the judge said and this is what the judge labeled you. So I think hearing the defense and the bad guys label you as a prostitute or label you in a certain way is one thing, but hearing a court refer to you in that same way, I really just can't imagine how tremendous of an impact that had to have had on these women.
Hey, John, can I ask a huge question I know that you and I talked about that I would love to get the inside scoop on? Do you mind if I?
Sure.
So one of the things that Brittany, you and Brad didn't talk about a lot was how in the heck the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I'm a former AUSA, right? How in the heck the U.S. Attorney agreed to that plea bargain? I mean, it stinks of corruption. So I was hoping, you guys obviously played that beautifully, delicately in the book, but I was hoping maybe you could share for those of us who would love to hear the theory on what the heck happened.
Yeah, I mean, it took us a long time for us to really understand what had happened. As you read in the book, it took us years just to get the correspondence between the government and Epstein and appealing it to the 11th Circuit and getting a ruling. And then still we got dribs and drabs of discovery until we could finally pull all of the thousands of documents that were exchanged between the government and Epstein's team together. And the picture that looks pretty clear is that from the very beginning, it's not only a really reputable defense team that covers its political bases, both locally, nationally, all of that, but they are also in their letters hinting toward Epstein's importance in the world and his philanthropy, and that he helps children in schools and other places, and that he's best friends with Clinton and helped found the Clinton Global Initiative and all this other stuff. We always believed, well, not always, we believed for many years that this was somebody high up in DOJ that cut the deal for him, because nothing else made sense. And especially doesn't make sense in juxtaposition with the fact that the victims are totally kept in the dark. Not only kept in the dark, you're telling the victims, be patient, hang out here. There's going to be this massive federal investigation. Right. And meanwhile, we're just like working out a plea deal behind the scenes. It doesn't make sense. So, I don't think after the 400-page OPR report that I'm revealing too much, but it was a more localized decision than most people think. It had to do with relationships, specifically relationships between prosecutors and members or a member of Jeffrey Epstein's team. It's not one of the main names who's thrown around a lot, but there was a personal relationship between a very high up supervisor that was actually making calls on the case and one of Epstein's attorneys. And, for years, we never even understood why he hired this particular attorney, because she doesn't fall in the good attorney, but doesn't fall in the category of the caliber of attorney that he had otherwise, until we later learned about this relationship. And it seems like they kind of worked out a waterside chat of do me a favor here. And the girls aren't really going to know about it. And the girls really don't have a voice, and they don't really have parents who care, and it's all going to go away. So, you know, let's be friends. And that's kind of how it went down. And then Alex Acosta really didn't pay any, you know, I think he didn't care one way or the other. I think he was really influenced by Jay Lefkowitz. It was his former law partner. I do think it smells really bad that Alex would meet with, during the middle of these negotiations, he would go meet at hotel rooms with Jay Lefkowitz to talk about the case. I mean, it's totally improper. And you're going into to these hotel room meetings where they're talking about potentially charging him with in a 53-page indictment and coming out of it with, what do you think about a non-prosecution agreement? So, you know, the whole thing just smelled. And what I don't think we put in the book was how many times we tried to get Alex to talk with us, even informally, and he refused. Tried to get him to sit for a deposition when he wouldn't, he refused. Would never even meet with us. And now still, I mean, his explanations are pretty weak.
Well, I think you're right that your case has made, you know, that if you really think about it, the chance that this corrupt scheme was going to be exposed was very low. And somehow you guys made it happen. But that's going to be in the mind of prosecutors in the future when in similar situations. And it's going to have a really great effect, I think, in other situations. But I don't think it changes. I hope you guys are right. You know, you've got Brittany, who's a lot younger than me, and Stan, no offense, I think is a lot older than me. I hope he is, after all he's accomplished in his life, because I haven't come close to that. I hope you're right. But I don't think so. I think that attitude is still there. Epstein is someone famous. He's someone great. He's a billionaire. He must be a valuable human being. And these poor kids are not valuable. I think that, you know, it's not, I don't want to be too critical because, you know, I know some of those people. I think they're good people. But I just think that's what they were thinking. And I'm not so sure that has changed so much in the past few years.
Well, the only way that I can really compare it, though, is to say, it's basically the same case that was prosecuted back in 2007 or non-prosecuted, and the case where we ultimately, you know, worked with the Southern District of New York, got him arrested. We've been dealing with the prosecutors in New York, both on Epstein's case and now Maxwell, and it's very, very different treatment. And I think that's why we started the book with the hearing, where essentially the judge in that case is citing to our case as, wait, I have to let the victim speak at this hearing, even if it's a dismissal hearing.
Yeah.
And so the treatment is much different. Now, is the treatment much different because they don't want to screw the same case up twice? Maybe there's a little bit of that, but they do bend over backwards for us with the travel, keeping us informed, any conferral. I mean, look, there's still prosecutorial discretion. Nobody was ever trying to override that, but the level of meaningful conference that we are getting with the prosecutors is extraordinary. Whereas before, it was literally just lying to the victims and then doing whatever they wanted. So, you know, comparing the two ways these prosecutors have handled it versus the past, there's really no comparison.
Yeah, it was against all odds. You guys accomplished that, and so I really do. Congratulations, because you've made a big. I think you've made a big effect on other cases. Let me bring on one more panelist. Julie Kane is not going to be with us. Her flight was delayed. She was coming to Chicago too. But we have one more panelist, which is Peter Spillis. If you could bring him up, Roland. He's one of my partners. I asked him to read the book after I finished it, which was well before we were going to do a book club on this. He also thinks it's a phenomenal book, so I wanted to bring him on. Peter heads up my firm's medical malpractice team, and I won't say any more because he's one of my own partners, but he is great in the courtroom.
I feel like I should be in Chicago. What am I missing?
Yeah, there's big things going on here, but not apparently consistent lighting. All right, so let me go back to, now that we got Peter here, and again, all the panelists join in whenever you want, and Brad, and by the way, later I'm going to be asking, I know a lot of you guys have emailed me questions that you want, which I've got, but we'll be asking if you have additional questions for Brittany and Stan and Brad. But let me follow up with something that Brad was talking about, which was the initial petition for enforcement of the Crime Victim Rights Act. One thing that may not be clear from the book is how brilliant that was, right? And how unprecedented that was. So, I mean, how'd you come up with that idea?
Honestly, it was working as a sole practitioner, and at that time knowing that I had to do something. It was just such an unusual situation. I really thought this was going to be a 2-minute telephone call to Marie Villafana, and she was going to say, yeah, tell Courtney to hang tight, everything's going to be all right. But that just wasn't the answer that I got. And then when I was getting answers, I could tell she wanted to tell me so much more than she was telling me. It was such a cagey interaction that I said, I have to do something. So what is the mechanism here? So I go and read the Crime Victims Rights Act, which I had never read before. And I was only really familiar with the state system and like our enforcement components there. So I read through it, and it says you can file an action in the district court. I thought, okay, but what's the action? Like I don't really know what action this is, and so I kind of just made up the title, and I think that I tried to lay it out pretty good in the book, just how it was a little bit of being naive, a little bit of being stupid, a little, I have to do something, I have to do something right now. But even as at that time, I think 5-year lawyer, it was pretty ignorant of me to think that I was going to go to the courthouse and literally get a hearing that second. But that is how important that I knew this was. I mean, I knew something is happening that's really bad on some monumental scale, and we as lawyers have to figure out some way to fix it. So my fix was like, create this pleading and go to the courthouse and tell them I want a hearing. So I will never forget how that went down. And
And he's repeated that 100 times since. Like, if something is wrong and it needs to be corrected, Brad will correct it in the most unconventional way, even where there is a conventional way to correct it, which I think is it's why we're sitting here today. It's why Jeffrey Epstein was arrested. It's why
I agree.
Ghislaine Maxwell's on trial, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It's really remarkable that all this was exposed. It makes me wonder how much other bad things are going on at Kirkland and Ellis with prosecutors, or in other firms too, that we just never find out about. So look, I tried to get a state attorney as well as some assistant state attorneys and federal prosecutors, but no one wanted to be a panelist on this one. So everyone on here has prosecuted civil cases. So I guess this question, I'd really love to get all of your thoughts on this, each one of you. I read Julie Brown's book on Epstein too, and it was after reading both of the books, I realized something. And the first thing I'm going to ask is, do you agree that with what I think is true, my realization? And then secondly, if there's anything we can do about it. But she goes into a little more detail on some areas, and it just hit me that the prosecutors, or at least some of them, thought of you, and by extension, really civil plaintiffs lawyers in general, as worse than Epstein, right? They were trying to protect him from the really bad guys, and they felt it was appropriate to do that. And there, if you look at some of the emails Julie Brown has, they really have a negative view of civil plaintiffs lawyers. So, I mean, at first I was like, holy shit, they think we're worse than Epstein. So my first question is, do you think I'm getting that wrong? I don't know if you read Julie's book. I don't know if you saw all the emails when they were negotiating with, but you probably saw them before they were in Julie's book. And then secondly, I mean, is there anything we can do about that? Are we at fault for how they look at us?
Well, I mean, first, Julie got those emails from me. So
okay,
we got them after fighting the 11th Circuit. But in the beginning, I mean, I know what you're talking about. There's a series where they're trying to choose who's going to be the representative for all of the victims, with the idea that they're going to get shuttled to this one lawyer who ends up being Bob Josephsberg. But they're going to get shuttled to one lawyer, and then all the cases are just going to resolve for $50,000. And that's how it was supposed to work out. And there was some discussion about other lawyers that might be in the mix. Chris Searcy was one that was named. And I think that the prosecutor, I don't remember if it was Andy or it was for Marie, but she says, or he says, look, I've heard some bad things about these plaintiff lawyers, that they're basically not gonna play ball and just settle these cases. And she says it as a bad thing, as opposed to it's a good thing. I mean, these cases shouldn't have been settled for $50,000. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's almost like we're cast as the bad guys for not agreeing to railroad these girls even more. It's totally absurd. But and I don't know that that's really changed. Brittany and I did a couple talks in the last, let's call it 3 or 4 years, to different state attorneys' offices. Not many in Florida, although we were able to do one in Broward State Attorney's Office. And since then, with that office and some of the others that we've talked to in Colorado, we have a good working relationship now, and they respect the fact that we can help them and they can help us. I would say that the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, I mean, a lot of it was because they had to, at least initially, rely on us a lot, because we're sitting over here with 75 bankers boxes of material and they have nothing. So, but we developed a really good working relationship with them. And I think they realized that there's some benefit to the symbiotic relationship, that we can share information, they can share information, we can work together as a team. However, I think that generally, if you ask almost any prosecutor in their heart of hearts, 99% of plaintiff lawyers are only going to foul up their case, don't understand the criminal system, are going to put the civil case in front of the criminal case, and that out of an abundance of caution, just don't talk to them at all. Don't deal with them. You know, unfortunately, there are some lawyers who can fit that description, and that makes it hard for us, but it's not the vast majority like the prosecutors think. And it's a hard mindset, I think, to change.
Well, and I think with respect to that particular subset
Rich,
of
I think
emails,
you're muted.
Sorry about that. Oh, go ahead, Brittany.
okay. I was just going to say, with respect to that particular subset of emails, I was a baby lawyer when Brad and I were reading through them. And it was particularly concerning to me because it seemed like they were looking at the civil lawyers are more of a checks and balances system. If you're not doing something wrong as a prosecutor, then why are you so concerned with people like Brad, overseeing it and getting involved and uncovering what they were doing, which was wrong. And so I think that having that extra layer of people who represent the victim themselves, the state does not represent the victim, they represent the state, or the federal government is represented by the AUSAs, and the victims having the lawyers to have a voice for them, I think for our clients at least, has been particularly important.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in, as having been with DOJ through the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2 different district offices, in Northern District of Florida, Middle District of Florida. There is a culture, it's a prosecution culture that I think from a couple different perspectives causes that kind of animosity. It's just baked into the office. One of which is that you got to remember, they also defend the government. Their whole civil office is defending cases against firms like ours. So just right off the bat, they're by nature a defense firm. And so we are kind of the bad guy to begin with. They're all government lawyers, they're all on a very, modest salary. And then when you look at, the Chris Searcy's of the world, there's another chink in the armor. There's a little of that, So when you start out with the defense mindset, you start out with, the typical government lawyer, not to disparage them. And then the third thing is, and I don't know if this has changed, I don't think it has, but back in the day, one of the big driving factors for so many of these cases was press and reputation and statistics. They're driven by those things. And so you've got a deal, you want your statistics, you don't want any bad press. Those are the worst possible. You want good press. To see your name in the paper is the greatest thing in the world as a federal prosecutor, especially as the U.S. attorney, because he's a political guy. And so the fact that now this plaintiff lawyer who's a money grubber is coming in, is going to disrupt this plea, make more work for us, and maybe get us, God forbid, bad press, that's anathema. And so I think for all those reasons, it's cultural and it's baked in. And that's what we're going against. We're seeing this in another case. And it's just, we would think, of course, they're going to cooperate with us and work with us. We represent the victims. Nope, it's cultural. So that's my personal take. I could be wrong, but unfortunately.
Let me ask Stan and Peter, I mean, your thoughts, but also maybe because Brad and Brittany and Richard and Rich, I don't know why I said Richard, I guess because it's up there on the that's what it says under his name. We're talking about the prosecutors, but I mean, I also want to talk about us, if there's anything we contribute to that viewpoint, but anything you want to add, Stan or Peter?
Yeah, I have a reaction to what Rich said and what you said earlier, which is I agree with it. I was at the Department of Justice also for a number of years. I did prosecute some criminal cases, the Kent State case, probably the most notorious of the bunch. But the civil rights, you're absolutely right, Rich. I discovered when we would have those meetings, with all the 94 U.S. attorneys once a year, that there was usually some sort of concern about what's the Civil Rights Division doing? Why can't you share things more with us? So we did. We said, fantastic, go for it. Well, nothing would be better than to have 94 offices engaged in civil rights enforcement. And then all at once, it was exactly what you said. It's like, well, wait a minute, not so fast there, Schwartz. This is, wait. This is just a pain. This is ugly stuff. Why don't you guys handle this in main justice? So you're absolutely right. That was my experience. I was a little surprised by it, but I think it is baked into the system. The other thing I just mentioned to all of the people who are participating in this seminar is that nobody gets to the bottom of justice like lawyers do. Nobody, even the press. And by the way, the press has been a major source of information for us in the government. When I was in the government, it's also a major source of information now. So I have nothing but respect for good investigative journalism. But nobody can dig and get to the bottom of what is harming the people that John started out by talking about. And those are people who, even today, after Me Too, are still powerless. And I think that there's nothing more dramatic than the powerlessness of girls and women who are assaulted. But it goes across the board. Indian Americans are powerless and invisible. The mentally retarded are totally, in Willowbrook, totally invisible. Hispanic kids who are put in the back of the room to cut and paste instead of learning are powerless. Black kids all over the place for a whole variety of reasons that we all know about, powerless. So I think that only the people who are on this phone call or this Zoom call are the people who make the difference.
Stan, I love hearing that because that's what I've been thinking this whole time. And I was thinking the whole time I was reading Brad and Brittany's book is it's just downright inspirational. We do these things in trial school to learn and also to be inspired. And just, getting put into their world and watching how many points along the way, it would have been so easy to just pack up your bags and go. Absolutely. I mean, just dozens of points along the way, Yeah. And the courage to walk away from big settlements, right? The courage to, when he hit you, when you lost the summary judgment on the malicious prosecution, right? And you're facing millions of dollars in fees and a judgment against you, it would have been awful easy. And I think a lot of people would have just said, you know what, we got to live to fight another day and let's move on.
Yeah, I don't like
doing that, and seeing you not do that is really inspirational for all of us, the people that do this, every day. So kudos.
Rich and I were just saying today when I saw him earlier that we think we would have folded at that point. I've assumed this is a closed group, right? Trial school. No one on here is going to tell the defense attorneys that I said that. Sorry, Rich, I added you too. No, but seriously, I mean, that was a heroic moment, Brad. I mean, I don't know if people tell you that as much as they should, because, I don't know if it's just you don't care about money. I think a lot of great plaintiffs lawyers, or you had greater faith in the court system, maybe than the court system justified. Maybe you were somewhat naive about the chances, the political pull of the people you were against. I don't know. But whatever it was, that was really a heroic moment.
Agreed. Yeah, I told John the same thing. I would have punted, man. And when I read that, I was just like, this guy, man. I mean,
Brad,
really next level. Bravo.
can I ask something? I don't know if you can tell us or not, but along the same vein, he kept hitting you with proposals for settlement that sounds like they were getting bigger and bigger. Are you able to tell us how big they got?
I don't remember, but into the millions though, into the millions, because he knew that I was turning it down. And
Yeah.
I don't know that we were able, once Jack Scarola and I got to really know one another, I realized I had the right lawyer because he can be super aggressive. And he really was. He was just, his whole attitude from the beginning was, I do not want you to get distracted from representing these girls and representing this case against the government. It's too important. I'll try to deal with the fact that Epstein's attacking you on the side. And I said, I'm not settling the case. I would say the first two proposals for settlement, Jack and I had long discussions about the pros and cons and the risks, and that it probably would be a good idea for you, Brad, to consider it, because his legal fees are going to be astronomical, and he wants nothing more than to hold something over your head. And I told him, no, absolutely not. I'm not selling this. At first, I think he thought that I was kidding, but like I said, after Jack and I got to know one another, he would literally call me and say, hey, you set a new record today. I'd say, what? He said, we got a proposal for settlement. I sent an email back 3 seconds later saying rejected. I go, yep, you understand me now. So one of the things I couldn't put in the book, just so you know just how crazy some of the things that Epstein would do were, he sent a lawyer to me and said to meet me at a restaurant, called me and said, we have to meet right now. I was represented by Jack. This lawyer contacted me under false pretense, acting as if he wanted to meet me on a different case. I showed up and he said, he talked about the other case for 3 seconds. And then he said, I just wanted to tell you, I talked to Mr. Epstein today. And he realized that you had a house that went into foreclosure because it had a flood, and that nobody these days in 2009 is foreclosing on such a situation. But Mr. Epstein's going to call the bank tomorrow and buy that loan. And unless you want him crawling up your ass, then I think you need to start seeing things his way.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, so I mean, he was really pulling a lot of, a lot of different maneuvers that.
Hey, Brad, can you tell us the name of that lawyer? I mean, that's not confidential, is it?
I mean, I don't know. I'll tell you offline. I don't know that I should share it.
Yeah.
That's
probably a good idea.
unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Let me, guys, we're going to take a 4-minute break. It literally is only 4 minutes to make a drink. We really want this to be a chat among friends. So everyone who's prepared to make a drink, the panelists, hopefully you have your drink kits. It's kind of hard to make them right in the middle, but so you can take a quick break, but it's really only 4 minutes. So don't go anywhere. And Roland, will you bring up our volunteer and actually, I'm supposed to introduce our bartender. Who do we have today? All right, we have Destiny as our bartender. He's owns some cool bars in New York City. Apparently he's an off-Broadway actor too. And I think this drink was his idea, the Poet's Martini. So we've got our volunteer who has her drink kit, and he's going to teach her in 4 minutes how to make this drink. And then we'll bring the panelists all back on.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. So tonight we will be making the Poet's Martini. And if you have never had a cocktail before, writers and cocktails go hand in hand since the beginning of time, since writing was invented and since it was put together to make it taste better. This one is a variation on a classic gin dry martini. And we're going to add one ingredient, Benedictine, which is a French liqueur made by Benedictine monks in Benedictine, France. And no one quite knows other than them how it's actually made, but it acts as a little sweetening agent and gives a lot of floral notes to your cocktail. And now from the recipe at imbibe.com, we'll be using a London dry gin. Today I'm using Plymouth. Some dry vermouth. I have Martini and Rossi, and Benedictine. And our measurements, to make sure they're accurate, we'll be using a bartender's measuring device, a jigger, and we will be stirring this cocktail with ice because there's no citrus in it, so no need to shake it. Start off with your 3/4 ounce of dry vermouth. And I think we only have one participant making a cocktail, but if you are, please unmute yourself and you have.
Can you hear me?
Hello,
I'm on the phone.
What's your name?
Hey, Susan.
Susan.
Susan,
Hi.
it's a pleasure. Now, Susan, do we have something to measure our liquid with?
Yeah, I actually pre-did mine and I put my vermouth and my Benedictine, measured them together. Is that really bad?
No, that actually works out perfectly. Together,
I
they
just
add-
wanted, so we didn't take a lot of time, you know? I have my 2 ounces of gin and this is my vermouth and my
So
Benedictine.
you're ahead of me, so I'm going to play catch up really quickly. Put in my
Okay.
dry vermouth, get in my Benedictine, and I truly love Benedictine on a personal level.
How
Much
much?
like on a personal level, I truly enjoyed your discussion as lawyers because my brother's a lawyer here in New York. He's not a trial lawyer. He does contracts and corporate law, so it's very much more boring than what you guys were discussing.
No, just kidding.
How much Benedictines, Destiny?
1/4 ounce.
Okay.
And if you
See,
don't
my
have a
in-laws
quarter,
are really into Benedictine.
say it again.
My in-laws love Benedictine. I think it's
Oh,
like
it's
a Catholic
phenomenal.
thing or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's less sweet than a simple syrup, but more than an Amara, which would be something else you could use. It's somewhere in between there, but like I said, it adds a lot of floral and herbal notes. Now, excuse me one moment while I grab my ice. As you can see, I have all my liquid in my stirring glass. And
I don't have a stirring glass though.
Huh?
I don't have a stirring glass. I used a tumbler. We're not shaking it.
Perfect. So if you want, I can do it the same way you are, because I have my
Okay.
Hawthorne, my classic shaker right here. And to make sure, one of the reasons we stir rather than shake when there's no citrus is you don't want air bubbles getting in between the liquid molecules, and we call that aeration. And you would need that for something that has a citrus in it, because much like a ceviche, that molecular friction of the shaking cooks the citrus and gets the real flavor you want out of it. But so we're just gonna roll this back and forth with an ice cube in there. I have one big ice cube just so it gets cold. It's doing the same thing that you would stirring. And the key is to make sure you're not rolling it too hard so that it can break the ice. So you have it cracked, because you don't want any little shards in your cocktail afterwards. So we're just
Can you hear him?
As you can see,
No.
I'm starting to get some frost on the outside of my shaker. See the difference here versus here? That lets me know I'm done. And I can strain it out. And then garnish with a lovely lemon twist. See here how clear and crisp.
Destiny, I didn't have any lemon, so I did an orange twist.
That's just
Cheers,
as well.
my brother.
No one's going to judge you because you're the one drinking it, I assume. So you make it however you want. Now, when expressing your twist, it's important to do it above the glass and hold it delicately and then give it just a light squeeze. And you'll see
Oh, this is good.
little, oil particles come off your zest, come off your peel and lay on the film on the top of your liquid. Because as we all know, water and oil do not mix. So what this does, I mean, you can rub your rind along the edge of your martini glass, and here you are, and you'll notice when you bring it up to your mouth, your nose gets all that citrus oil in it, but then when you sip it, you get a different flavor. They play together. They allow the other to live their best life, as they say, or be their best flavor. And here we have our Poet's Martini. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, thank you very much, Susan. Thanks for volunteering. I hope that was
My
useful
pleasure.
for
It
the
was.
future.
This is delicious.
If you
It is very
volunteer
nice.
for this, you got to be a little embarrassed when you make your drink, but we send you all the bottles and everything so you can do it. Thank you, Susan. Destiny, I hope things are going great in
Thank
New
you.
York City. Maybe
They
I'll
are.
get to go to one of your bars in person soon. Thank you.
Hopefully. Hope to see you all there. And I'm going to stick around because the discussion is very intriguing.
All right. I actually heard, I know that Destiny's going off, but someone told me that Destiny's brother, he mentioned is a lawyer. I decided I wasn't even going to bring this up because it was kind of 19 steps removed, but Destiny's brother, who's a
Don't.
lawyer, his mentor, what he said, don't?
No, I actually talked to, so my brother's a lawyer and he works for the DA in Atlanta after his undergraduate education at Emory University. Now his mentor, who is a family friend of ours, is very familiar with the New York prosecuting lawyers in the Epstein case because his client was the Epstein's cellmate at the end of his life.
Oh my God.
So I called my friend Bruce, asked him if he knew y'all, and he said, no, I'm not very familiar with the Florida lawyers, but I know the New York guys, and no, I cannot tell you anything more other than that. And I said, okay, I get it, Bruce, no problem.
So it's a small world. I think you guys mentioned that in the book too. Anyway, thank you, Destiny and Susan.
My pleasure.
All right, so I've got a bunch of questions from participants, and I'm sure we'll be getting some more as we go. I guess, let me start for Stan and Brad and Brittany, all of you. We've got somebody who's done a lot of similar work and faced the reality in some of his cases against churches, I think, of modest recoveries, and just the reality that sometimes the recoveries weren't as high as we all think they should be in situations like that. What are your thoughts on that and how to handle that, how to talk to clients about the situations like that?
Want me to go? So are we just talking about the fact that a lot of these intentional torts, there either isn't, let's call it deep pockets or somebody who's able to pay. Not every single person who commits these types of acts is a Jeffrey Epstein or Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein or whatever. I think that, you know, like I always like to say, first meeting with clients is from me. Brittany could finish my sentence right now. You're gonna hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's not always going to be what you want to hear. It's going to be just the flat, dead honest truth. And let's talk about, you know, the fifth element to any tort, which is, where's the money coming from? You know, is there insurance? Is there anybody who's going to be able to pay? Because we have to set reasonable expectations up front. And I think that's a big part of it, because if you don't do that and you don't have that discussion, you're only going to have a very upset client along the way. So, you know, to me, it's one of those things where you have to tell them going in. And I think it's more important, at least from my standpoint, for me to know what their expectations are, so that I make sure that even if we hit a home run, that we're going to be able to meet their expectations and that they're reasonable. Because, you know, I love what we do, but we're not magicians. I mean, we're lawyers who are hopefully going to do a really good job and get justice, but it's not always going to be, you know, $10 million because either the circumstances don't justify it, or there's no, you know, you're not draining blood from a rock. So I really think that up front we handle those conversations, and then we still run into issues with certain clients along the way. But I do find in this niche of representing crime victims that we have people who recognize that we're not just lawyers, we become somehow their therapists, their trusted friends, the person they call about everything, and that we have a good enough relationship that and line of communication that we don't really run into too many issues like that. And if we do, they're going to know about it the second we know about it. I mean, I just think it's communication.
Dan or
And
Brittany, you want to add to that?
Yeah, something interesting that we've experienced with specifically Epstein or some of these wealthier defendants too is the way that the press influences our clients' expectations. You know, you have the Epstein estate when he died that has $600 million in it. So you have each individual client thinking this guy has $600 million and all of his victims should get all of that money and nothing should be left over because he was a bad guy. So tempering expectations with media reports and how much money exists, I think has been particularly difficult for us because it's hard to explain why this person who did these horrible things, why all of his money shouldn't just go to all of his victims and not to any of the beneficiaries. So, you know, we feel like we've done a great job for someone and they call and they say, okay, but now there's $559 million left. Where is that going? So I think the media has an influence on this topic for us too.
Hey, Brittany, do you mind just, again, because I know others have these questions, what's the status of the estate and the island? I mean, what's the rest of the story? I mean, I'd love to hear kind of what happened to all of that stuff and how much the victims did get.
Brad, you can answer. I know this is one of your favorites.
I knew you were going to kick it over to me.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a pretty good basis for believing that there is a lot of money outside of the jurisdiction, likely in Saudi Arabia, type area that nobody is ever going to get, and that's just kind of the way it is. But $669 million was what the estate was originally estimated as in the Virgin Islands. They had not paid taxes, so $200 million came right off the top. So we were down to 450. They then paid $171 million in back taxes. So we almost lost $400 million right away. We were down to about $300 million because some of the assets ended up being worth more than they were originally estimated at. So it started balancing a little bit, but we were down to about $300 million. And I don't think that, you know, we wrote the book before the claim program got set up, but I thought that was pretty interesting because when Jeffrey Epstein died, we filed the first claim against the estate. And I called the estate lawyers and said, you need to try to set up a program. Otherwise, you're going to end up, you know, in litigation and the money's going to get eaten up and a lot of victims aren't going to get anything and you're going to be wasting the estate. And so we started working with the estate lawyers. It was actually Brittany and I and the estate lawyers writing up what the protocol would be for this, for the crime victim, for the Epstein victim program. And the estate wanted to do it their way with their people under their rules. And we essentially had the Attorney General for the USVI. We provided them information. They filed a civil SICO case, which is basically their version of RICO, against the estate, which froze the islands and it froze the entire estate. So then we go to this hearing in the USVI and the courtroom has no air conditioner or anything. And the judge is super overwhelmed. I mean, there's lawyers flying in from the United States and it's kind of chaotic. But afterward, everybody's fighting in the hallway, trying to get on camera. And Brittany and I basically snuck out the back door, went down the street. This is true. We went down the street, went to the Attorney General's office, knocked on her door and asked, hey, can we have a meeting with you? And she thought like we're crazy, but we go in and have a meeting. I know that the substance of all of the meetings that transpired after that's probably very heavily confidential, but we developed a really close relationship and we ultimately said, we can use you to help us make the best program that can exist. First of all, we're going to assign as one of the panelists that's going to be in charge of this program, somebody that's victim friendly, not chosen by the estate. And we want Marcy Hamilton. Marcy Hamilton's like the most well-known victim advocate that there is in the country. And we said, put her on the panel. Once she's on the panel, now we know that it's going to operate fairly. The system's going to operate fairly. She says, okay, will they go along with it? I said, they have to go. The estate has to go along with it because you're basically holding the entire estate hostage. And then when we'll try these mini trials and whatever the award is, you then agree only to release that amount. So let's say there's a $2 million award. We will then call you, Attorney General. You can release $2 million to be paid right to the victim, and you can still keep the estate fully under wraps. Like they can't get to anything. And that's still the case today. Now, obviously, there has to be something in it for the USVI. So what currently has happened is the 2 islands down there look like they are going to be forfeited to the USVI under their RICO laws because they were used for the commission of sex trafficking. So it's worked out good for the Attorney General. It did work out, I think, really well. Of all of those types of programs, I don't think any program has even come close to the one that we put together for the Epstein victims. We tried 68, tell me if my numbers are wrong, Brittany, but we had 68 Epstein clients. We tried 68 of those trials by Zoom in 13 months. So we were in trial constantly on these cases. And of the 68, I think we got verdicts in 60 of them, maybe 58 of them. And now we're still litigating the other 10. But overall, I thought that it was really successful. But I think that the estate is probably down to, take the islands away because they're going to be the USVI, it's probably down to $100 million.
Well, and statistically speaking, there were 150 claims that were accepted as eligible by the program, and they paid out $121 million. So that's how you get from the number we had before down to the 50 or so.
That's what we were asking, Brittany.
I got you.
Thank you. That was a great story. Thank you for that. I was really curious.
I was answering the next question.
No. I didn't mean to say we didn't want to hear what you said, Brad. That was all interesting, but you left out the part that Brittany
We work
had.
together, like together we're one
Yeah.
lawyer. So I finished the sentence for him.
Hey, the other question that I got to ask, and because John and I talked about this at lunch, and there was another lawyer there who couldn't attend today, but he's like, here's what I want to know. How in the heck did Epstein get all this money? Okay, he ripped off, what's his name, for a couple $100 million, but come on, Trilateral Commission, this whole thing stinks. There's just, and I know you guys touched upon that a little bit, but is there any way you could share a little more scoop, or is there anything more to that?
Yeah, well, Stan, you could start because you worked with him.
Well, I didn't, yeah, sort of. We actually never did a deal together, but yeah, the only part of the book, he talks about, Brad talks about how I helped with the book. The only part of the book I never saw was what he was writing about me. I didn't see that until it was published.
Yeah, those were some great parts of the book, though. That's why I wanted to see what you look like.
Yeah, the 008 stuff doesn't pass muster. I don't think that anybody knows.
I'm pinning you right now so I can take a closer look. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was doing all that stuff I was talking about before you were born, so you were right about my age. I don't think that anybody knows for sure where his money came from. There were a lot of different rumors about them because in the absence of facts, rumors are always going to fill the vacuum, right? So is he working for the United States government? Does he work for the CIA? Does he work as an arms dealer? Is he dealing in drugs? Does he have a special relationship with ATF or DEA or DOJ? There are all of these rumors, none of which I have seen any supporting evidence to back them up, not one. I think that he got most of his money from a handful of people. The vast majority of it came from Les Wexner, who he was very close to, and who was and is a billionaire, a multi-billionaire in Ohio, wealthiest man in Ohio, wealthiest person in Ohio. And I think he got most of it from there. I think he also, as we've seen, got 150 to 200, maybe 150 million or so from a major hedge fund operator in New York. So you start adding, if you start adding up 100 million here and 100 there, you get into, as Everett Durkin said, you get into some real money. And I think that's where his 669 million came from, were a small handful of people. Now, you would ask the fair question, what did he do for them that he could get 100, 200, 400 million dollars from any of them? What kind of services? Since he doesn't have a back office, he doesn't have 100 people making money, he doesn't make a product, it's just him. So what could he alone do to justify that? And that's where the rumors get really curious. You start using your imagination and it's not a pretty picture.
Yeah, but I think overall, I mean, he was the world's best grifter. I mean, it was one con and scam after another. And what he did realize, which was, very astute of him and something I don't think anyone else has realized to this level, is that really, really rich people don't miss $100 million. They just don't, I mean, like when we were dealing with Wexner's people, it was like, okay, it got ripped off for $400 million, but we're not going to do anything about it because I have $6 billion over here and it makes me look like a fool. It may make you look like a fool, but that's a lot of freaking money. But they didn't care to do anything. And I mean, I know the person that you're talking about now, Stan, is like Leon Black. I think it's public at this point that Leon Black has provided hundreds of millions of dollars to Jeffrey Epstein. And for what service? Allegedly for some ultra secretive tax services. But I've talked to Jeffrey Epstein about and been on the phone with his accountant. He's no tax genius. So what's really happening, I don't know. But I mean, he swindles really wealthy people out of a lot of money and basically embarrasses them not to tell on him. I don't know if anybody saw that he almost got Bill Gates for something close to $1 billion. I mean, so the contract that was written up was for Jeffrey Epstein to get a VIG, like a 1% or 2% of all the money he raised through all of his connections for a charity for Bill Gates. Now, Bill Gates, what he didn't see is that there was this provision that Jeffrey Epstein was actually going to get 1 or 2%. And he's supposed to raise, I think, $10 billion. So, I mean, that's just another way that he's basically written in a clause that at the end of the day, he wins. It's not really a charity thing. It's Jeffrey Epstein takes in money, and the money, here's the sad thing that nobody's ever focused on. This sex trafficking operation, as complex as it was, as many companies as were involved, as many employees as were involved, could not have existed but for the extraordinary wealth that it had. But for Les Wexner and the Leon Blacks and the others, it couldn't have existed. I mean, he had so many employees and so many companies that did all of these things that they didn't really do. The way that the infrastructure worked that allowed hundreds, if not 1,000 victims to come in, it just couldn't have happened. So, I mean, to me, there's been less accountability for the funders than there probably should have been.
That's the best Stan and Brad together explanation of where he got his money that I've ever heard. And I've done, tried to research it because it's such a fascinating question. And I actually now think I feel like I understood it, and I never did before this point. So thank you. I think, Stan, what you said.
One footnote to add to what Brad said is that the grifter nature of his ability explains why he himself, Epstein himself, would hint that he had relationships with justice or the FBI or the CIA. He would hint at that in ways that were very effective, when the truth is, now that he's dead and killed himself, and by the way, no one in any agency of power came to his aid, you might notice. In fact, the Justice Department Bureau of Prisons kind of screwed up. Far from owning them, they messed him up. I think that those were all grifter things, as Brad says. I don't think that he had any serious relationship with a major federal government agency.
All right, well, so that's another question you've cleared up. I trust your thoughts on this because I've never seen anyone with more knowledge have a better answer. And like you said, Stan, my imagination started to run away because there's so much to work with. So anyway, I really think that's a great answer. So thank you, guys. Let me just clear up a couple of questions. I tried to answer some of the questions in the chat, a couple of quick ones, and then I want to finish. I have a very important question to finish on, but just a couple of quick questions from people. Do you have any more information? Do you think he was able to bug that Starbucks, Brad? One of our people wants to know, like, what's your current thinking on that?
Tell him when he left his wallet at the table, Brad, because that's what I think the answer is.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I'll tell you that Brittany's better at this than me, but it really was eerie during certain periods of time where Brittany and I would talk about what was going on with the case, and she would say something like, "Don't you wish he would just call right now and clear it up?" And I swear to you, 5 seconds later, he would call my cell phone.
Wow.
I mean, our office was definitely bugged. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
It happened so many times. I mean, half a dozen times that happened in that sequence, that close in time to us basically inviting him to call.
We went and visited Courtney Wild when she was in jail at the beach. And it was actually the first time I had met Courtney, and we got in the car to leave the jail, and we're driving, and Courtney was showing us her bicycle. Like, she was outside showing us her bike, and we're sitting in the car, and it was Jeffrey Epstein calling Brad on his cell phone in the car as we left Courtney Wild.
So do you guys mind if I answer that question on your behalf?
Yes.
Or even if you do mind? Yes, it was bugged. I don't know about the Starbucks, but look, they found a transmitter on Jaffe's car. I mean, it's so easy. People with that money, corporations bug each other all the time. Yes, I'll just settle that. Did Epstein leave any money to Maxwell? Do you know?
Well, so we're trying to find that out. For sure, the $29 million that she attempted to put up for bail money is derived from Epstein. He gave her a house in New York when he moved to the house that he took over from Wexner. And she sold that house during the litigation where we were suing her on behalf of Virginia Roberts. She sold it for $19 million, $18 or $19 million. And now, she was able to, at some point in time, put up, I think, $29 million offer of bond that, the judge denied. That's all
that we should talk about with Maxwell today.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I forgot about that. I withdraw the question. Am I allowed to do that? I strike the question to the court reporter in my hotel room.
Thank you, sir.
Brittany, you got to come in with that objection earlier.
Yeah. I thought you were going to go short and sweet.
No, it's my fault. It's my fault.
Hey, I got to jump in. I'm not going to ask the question, but let me just say, I'm sure hoping she rolls. I can't wait to hear what she says when she starts to sing, when she gets 5 life sentences. That's going to be a really cool next chapter. Maybe you guys will write a sequel. I'm just going to make that comment.
That wasn't a question, Brad. Not a question.
Yes, exactly.
Not a question.
Yeah. So
just for the record, I think everything that Brad said about Maxwell has been public information. I just want to pad the record with that. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely true. But I also just don't want to continue the conversation.
I agree.
So one more, and I want to end on this important question, but I just remembered there's one other question from participants that I forgot to ask. Maybe we can handle this briefly. We try to finish at around 1 hour and 15, but a lot of times it goes to 1 hour and a half. Several people were interested if you could tell us a little bit more about working at the Rothstein firm and what it was like to, it turned out to be part of or somehow involved with one of the largest Ponzi schemes in American history. And it's I shouldn't curse, but it's a law firm.
I mean, there were lawyers there. Whether in the end it was a law firm, I think we're all still trying to figure out. But I started there in April of 2009. So I was there for just long enough for October of 2009. Rothstein takes off with all the money and the FBI comes and takes everyone's files. What was good for me was that I was working as a confidential informant for the FBI at the time when they were raiding Rothstein's office. So it's kind of funny. I was going over to the U.S. Attorney's Office or FBI trying to work this undercover operation against Epstein's butler. And so I'm meeting with them the whole time. They're not telling me at all that, hey, we're investigating your law firm right now. So I'm getting wired up on telephone calls, helping them bust the butler at the same time. In the next room, they're busting my boss. So yeah, that's
incredible.
It was really a crazy time. The best thing I could say is it never felt like a traditional law firm, but nothing about it ever made me think that there was something bad going on. Meaning, I think we had 5 floors at RRA, and all day long, there were uniformed police officers walking the hallway the whole time. Not like mobsters, you know, the uniformed police officers walking the hallway the whole time. The last thing you think is that you're working some, you know, at some illegal operation. So it was a good cover, I guess.
Brittany, did you work clerk at Krupnick Campbell?
Yeah, I did. That's
So
how I
just got,
made my
I
move.
got a text from John Krupnick. They were sorry you got away, and he's even sorrier now. So
That is very cool.
I thank them all the time for making that mistake.
So do I.
All right, so let me ask you one question, my last question. And I don't know that this is an easy answer, but everybody, Rich, Peter, everybody on here, I'd like to hear all your thoughts on this. How should we judge, and I mean this in a moral sense, not a legal sense, the defense lawyers in this case? And so let's take Jay Lefkowitz. Brad, you talked about him earlier. I don't know if you know, but he, you know, when he worked in the Bush White House, Bush called him the Viper. He and GM, when he worked for GM, he was a lawyer for GM, and that's where the nickname started. He negotiated that deal in the hotel room with Acosta, and I know him. As an aside, he actually hit my partner in the face in the Broward County Courthouse during a hearing once, but I like him. I think he's like a man of his word. He's very religious. I'm sure if you know him, you know how religious he is. He seems honorable as far as I can tell. But he went to a hotel room with the United States attorney. That's not access that normal people get, right? He was using influence. He works in the Bush White House, or he had just left. He's dealing with Bush appointees. He's using access to meet in the hotel room with the U.S. attorney, and the U.S. attorney, not an assistant U.S. attorney. And he used his influence to put what you guys said in the book, potentially the most prolific child molester in U.S. history, back on the streets. I mean, is that just good lawyering, or is there a moral judgment here? Is that like evil?
Yeah, he did it for money. I'll call it out. Yes, he did it for money. That's awful. Shame on him. I'll say it right now. I'd say it to his face. All right. That's terrible and despicable, in my opinion.
I think it, you know, in terms of Epstein's legal team, which had 20 lawyers on it at the time, that he seemed to be, just based on the correspondence, the pleadings that were getting filed, the real legal work, he seemed to be the real brains behind the operation. You know, he came up with the various strategies. He came up with the different ways of maneuvering in and out of different plea deals, of adding supplements and taking them away. All of that type of maneuvering is, when you read the whole picture, you go, that's kind of gross. You're taking advantage of somebody. But good legal sound arguments without telling lies. He wasn't lying. I mean, he didn't say ever that Epstein didn't do this or whatever. So he tried to work out the best plea deal. Do I think he should have met off campus, as they would call it? Of course not. I think that's ridiculous. And he should know better. But in reality, Alex Acosta is much more to blame than he is. Alex Acosta doesn't have to take that meeting. Any defense attorney, probably, that has a chance for his client to meet with the highest ranking person that's going to make a decision, is probably going to take that meeting. You're getting to meet off campus. That meeting should never happen, but that's on behalf of the government. So, you know, I had less of a problem with him than I did some of the others. Like,
But Brad, I want to hear your response to this. Let me just, you know, I apologize for interrupting, but I want to focus on this point. Okay, so we did The Devil in the Grove a few, I think the last session or the one before, and which, by the way, if you haven't read The Devil in the Grove, you guys should read it. It's a phenomenal book. But Paul Perkins, who is the son of one of the lawyers in that case, I was asking if the sheriff, and if you've read the book, the sheriff's evil and he's in hell right now. But I was asking that question, and Paul Perkins stopped me and he said, when you individualize it, right, on Alex Acosta, you're excusing all the other people who let it happen. So back up a minute. Alex Acosta is a partner with Jay Lefkowitz. He's a fucking former partner. And Ken Starr is a former judge. United States federal judge, and their offices are on the same floor of when they were working together. And they put people into positions of public trust, and then they come back to Kirkland and Ellis. Isn't that the whole fucking scheme? You know, we can say, oh, he shouldn't have taken the meeting, but isn't that the whole plan when people, I mean, I don't want to get too focused on Kirkland and Ellis, but isn't that the whole plan? It's not just, you can't, I don't want to individualize this if it's really a systemic problem.
I agree with you. I do think that was the plan, but I think the plan was in reverse. It was Epstein figuring out what type of trouble he is in with who, and then hiring the people that are going to have the inside connections to get to the top of every layer that he needed to get to at any time, whether it is Jay Lefkowitz communicating with Alex Acosta about, off campus, or whether it is the senior AUSA who's actually making decisions and hiring that guy's girlfriend to go hang out with him. I mean, no matter how it was a bunch of, let me figure out the right pieces. And yeah, I have a 20-person legal team now, and I have one lawyer who will just tell rampant, crazy, off the rails lies and just craziness. I have that guy, so he's going to distract from everyone else. And then behind the scenes, I have this legal team who you know, and they're going to put the pieces together why this major, distractor is just spouting off all over the place and somehow still has credibility. So I think it was.
You don't need to name names there. Thank you.
Yeah. Don't say the name, but so, and again, I remind everyone, all of this is confidential, but still don't say that name. So Stan, what do you think? I mean, is it okay to go work at a commercial firm and use, if you start out there as a young lawyer, you think that's normal. Billionaires should be able to get away with this stuff.
Yeah, I think it is a matter of excess. I think that it would be foolish in any society, including China, Russia, Pakistan, and America, and not to mention France and the UK, to think that people of wealth and influence will not use it. So I wouldn't be naive about that. But there are canons of ethics for a reason, and that is that they draw lines. And whether Jay crossed that line or not, I'm not sure. But I do think it's a problem. I agree it's a problem. A famous lawyer said every defendant is entitled to a lawyer. They just aren't all eligible to have me. So that leaves them with somebody. I don't know who, but that leaves them with somebody. I think in the case where you got a whole lot of money, you don't have to go too far down to the bottom of the barrel. If people start turning you down as a client for moral reasons, you keep going down and down and down until you find somebody, who's a cuff shooter from someplace who's going to represent you. But if you have a lot of money, you don't have to go that way. And I think that's where the lines have to be drawn more vividly. Again, I'm not judging Jay Lefkowitz on this because I don't know those ins and outs as well as Brad does from having been there. But I think you are right to say it's a systemic problem. I think that's exactly right. I think it's a brilliant insight. It's a systemic problem, not just one person, and don't make a martyr out of one person. Yeah.
Well, that was actually Paul Perkins Jr. who said that at the last one. Who's the son of Paul Perkins who's in the lawyer along with Thurgood Marshall in The Devil in the Grove. So I wouldn't take credit for it, but yeah, it changed my way of thinking about stuff like this. All right, so look, we're 7:28. I tell people an hour and 15, but it always, and when we have such a great group like this, it always goes a little bit longer. Stan, Peter, Brad, Brittany, Richard, since it says that on your video, I'll call you Richard instead of Rich. I really appreciate it, you guys, really. Really great panel and great insight. Brad and Brittany, thank you for writing this book. And let me just finish with that, because a lot of people have told me that, and I know we've said it, but it's inspiring to read the book. and it makes us all want to be better lawyers. And that's one of the functions of trial school, to inspiring, not just teaching skills, and certainly of the book club. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for everybody. I
Great.
really appreciate
Here,
it.
here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Take care.
All right. Thanks.
All
guys.
right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody, and
Thanks,
great
guys.
job again. Wonderful book. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you.